Vivid verses.
The evening she said it, we were eating takeout at the kitchen table. Thai food in those white plastic containers, the kind with the red lids that never quite seal properly. I remember a smear of peanut sauce on the edge of the container nearest her elbow, and how she'd been talking for about 20 minutes straight without looking at me once, her eyes moving between her phone and the middle distance over my left shoulder, the place people look when they're rehearsing rather than conversing. Her name was Lily. I'd known something was shifting for a while. You don't share a life with someone for as long as we had and miss the gradual changes in pressure, the way affection becomes obligation, the way laughter starts arriving a half-second too late, performed rather than felt. I'm not claiming any special sensitivity. I'm just a person who pays attention, and I had been paying very careful attention to Lily for a long time. She'd been talking about her job. That was nothing new. The project that was finally getting the recognition it deserved, the team that kept failing to see what she was building, the one person who actually got it. That last part was new, or rather, the frequency of it was new. The name that kept appearing in her sentences like a returning motif. Owen. Owen thought the quarterly projections were too conservative. Owen agreed with her read on the client. Owen had sent her an article that was so perfectly aligned with what she'd been saying for months that she'd actually laughed out loud at her desk. Owen, Owen, Owen. I noted it. I hadn't said anything about noting it, because there was nothing concrete to say yet, and I'm not interested in having arguments about feelings when facts will eventually present themselves with more clarity. So I'd watched. I'd filed things away. She set down her fork and picked up her phone and showed me something, a message thread, too briefly to read, and said he sent me this today, and then put the phone back down before I could see what it said, and she was smiling at the screen as she turned it face down on the table. I took a bite of my food. She said, I'm just saying, it's different when you work with someone who actually understands what you're trying to accomplish. Like at a fundamental level. That sounds valuable, I said. It is. She finally looked at me, but it was the look of someone checking whether a point had landed, not the look of someone who wanted to be seen. Do you know how rare that is? Someone who gets your ambitions without you having to translate everything. I can imagine it's rare, I said. She went back to her food. A few minutes passed. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car door closed twice, somebody struggling with the latch. Then she said it. She didn't frame it as a question or a hypothesis. It came out almost lazily, with the cadence of someone thinking aloud about something they'd already been turning over privately. She said, I mean, honestly, if I absolutely had to choose between the connection I have with Owen professionally and whatever this is, she gestured vaguely at the space between us at the takeout containers and the kitchen table and me. I think I'd probably choose the person who actually understands me. She laughed a little after she said it. The laugh that was supposed to sand down the edges. The laugh that said, this is too dramatic to be serious. Don't make it weird. I looked at her across the table. She expects one of two responses, I thought. She expects me to either argue, to make a case for myself, for us, which would be satisfying because it would confirm she matters enough to fight over. Or she expects me to laugh it off with her, to treat it as the venting of someone who had a long week, which would also be satisfying because it would mean the comment cost nothing. She gets to have said it either way. I did not argue. I did not laugh. I said, okay. She looked up from her food. Okay, what? I take you at your word, I said. You've thought about it, and you've told me what you'd choose. That seems worth respecting. The laugh came again, but shorter this time, uncertain. I'm not actually choosing anything. It was hypothetical. You said if I absolutely had to. You made the hypothetical as close to real as you could get it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even particularly elevated. My voice had the same register it would have if I were discussing a logistical matter. I believe you knew what you were saying. You're being ridiculous. Maybe. I finished my food. I was still hungry afterward. I remember noticing that, but I didn't get more. I'm going to call Owen tomorrow. She stared at me. You're what? What? Because you've told me he's the better match for what you're looking for. That's useful information. It seems like the responsible thing to do is to let him know you're available and interested, given that you've already made the comparison and reached a conclusion. Her face had gone through several things in the span of about 4 seconds, and I watched each of them the way you watch weather patterns, not with judgment, just with observation. Surprise, then something that might have been amusement, then a hard edge of something that wasn't quite anger but was adjacent to it. That is insane, she said. Is it? You said what you'd choose. I heard you say it. It was a figure of speech. Was it? I thought. Because you've said his name 11 times in the last 2 weeks that I've counted. You turned your phone face down so I couldn't read what he sent you, and you were smiling at it before you did. You've described his understanding of you with more warmth than you've directed at me in the last 2 months. Figure of speech. I didn't say any of that. It wasn't the moment for it, and it also wasn't necessary. The facts are the facts whether I narrated them or not. I'm going to finish up some things, I said. I clear my side of the table and put my container in the recycling. Thanks for dinner. I called Owen the next evening. I thought carefully about how to do it, not about whether to do it. That question had resolved itself the moment I made the decision, but about the tone, the framing, what outcome I was actually trying to produce. The goal is not to make a scene, I told myself, sitting in the spare room with my phone. The goal is to be clear. I didn't know Owen. I'd heard his name. So often he felt vaguely familiar, but we'd never met. I had his number because Lily had it stored in the shared calendar for a team event she'd been planning, and the shared calendar was still shared. He picked up on the 3rd ring. His voice was guarded immediately. He didn't know the number. Owen, I said, this is Lily's husband. I want to be straightforward with you, so I'll just say it. Lily told me last night that if she had to choose between her connection with you and our marriage, she'd choose you. I'm not calling to accuse you of anything. I'm calling because I believe in taking people seriously when they tell me something. If she's interested in pursuing something there, I'm not going to stand in the way of that. I just thought you should know the conversation happened and that it's been heard. Silence on the other end. Not the silence of someone composing a response. The silence of someone who had just stepped on something in the dark and was now completely still, waiting to understand what they'd found. He started. Stopped. I don't. I think there's been a misunderstanding. That's possible, I said. But I'd rather operate on what I've been told than pretend I didn't hear it. Have a good evening. I hung up. Let it sit, I thought. Let it sit and see what it does. What it did, over the course of the following week, was clarify everything very efficiently. Lily came to me 2 days later in the kitchen before I'd had coffee, and she was wound tight in that particular way that meant she'd been rehearsing. She said Owen had been distant at work. She said conversations that used to happen between the two of them directly were now being routed through a 3rd colleague, a woman named Tess, as if Owen had quietly recalibrated the geography of the office to put a buffer between himself and Lily. She said, he's being weird with me, and I don't know why. I pour my coffee. I called him, I said. The quality of the silence that followed was specific and total. You called him. I told you I was going to. I thought you were being. She stopped. Started again. What did you say to him? I told him what you told me. That if you had to choose, you'd choose him. I told him I wasn't calling to make accusations, just to be clear that I'd heard what you said and was taking it seriously. He seemed surprised. You humiliated me, she said. I turned around then, and I looked at her with the same steady attention I'd been giving her since the beginning of the conversation, since the conversation at the kitchen table, since I'd first started cataloging the small, accumulating evidence of a marriage in the process of changing shape. I heard you say what you'd choose, I said. I contacted the person you'd named. I was honest with him about what you'd said. I don't know which part of that is humiliating, but none of it was dishonest. You didn't have to call him. That was vindictive. Was it vindictive? I turned the question over genuinely, because I try to be honest with myself in the same way I'm honest elsewhere. Was there satisfaction in it? Was there an element of wanting to show her that words have weight? There might have been a trace of something. But when I examined the decision, the core of it was simple and clean. She had told me something. I had believed her. I had acted on what she told me, because she was a grown woman who said words with meaning, and she had said them clearly. The alternative, to dismiss it, to treat her statement as too impulsive to be real, would have been the more condescending move. It would have been me deciding that she didn't mean the things she said, that I knew better than she did what was real inside her. I believed her. That seemed like respect. I don't think it was vindictive, I said. I think I took you seriously. There's a difference. She left the kitchen. I drank my coffee. I was staying in the spare room by then. That had been my choice, not an exile. The first night after the kitchen table conversation, I'd simply decided that the main bedroom was a space I didn't want to occupy until there was more clarity, and I'd move my things without announcement and without drama. A pillow, my phone charger, a book. The necessities. I'd started making parallel arrangements. Nothing irreversible yet, just research. Apartment listings. The name of a family law attorney a colleague had mentioned once in a context I'd filed away without knowing I'd need it. The kind of quiet preparation that you do not because you've made a final decision, but because you're not willing to be caught without options. I'm not afraid of the outcome, I told myself, scrolling through listings late one evening with my back against the spare room wall. I'm not trying to manufacture a particular result. I'm just not going to pretend the last 2 weeks haven't happened. The listings were practical. 1-bedrooms, mostly. A second-floor unit in a complex near the part of the city where I knew the coffee shops were good and the commute was manageable. A ground-floor place with a small fence garden. I had always liked the idea of a small fence garden, something I'd never mentioned to Lily because it had always seemed like a detail too minor to share. It occurred to me, lying there, that there were probably many details I'd never shared with her because they'd seemed too small. And many details she'd shared with Owen because with him the bar for relevance was lower or the appetite for her specifics was higher. I didn't feel bitter about this realization. I just noted it. It told me something about what had hollowed out between us, and when, without requiring me to assign blame, I put in a query on the second-floor unit. The conversation that mattered happened on the back patio. It was a Saturday afternoon, and she came out with 2 mugs, tea, which was a kind of olive branch encoded in domesticity, and set one in front of me without asking and sat down in the other chair and looked out at the garden for a while before saying anything. I let her take the time she needed. I've been thinking, she said finally, about what I said. At dinner. I have too, I said. I don't actually want Owen. She said it to the garden, not to me. That's not what I meant. It was easier to say his name than to say what I actually meant, which is that I've been feeling unseen. Like my ambitions are inconvenient here. Like I have to dim myself down to fit inside this marriage. I thought about that. I thought about it carefully because she was telling me something and I had committed to listening carefully to the things she told me. Is that how it's felt? I asked. Yes. For how long? A pause. She turned her mug in her hands. I don't know. A while. Have you ever told me that directly? Not comparisons, not hypotheticals. Have you ever just said it the way you just said it to me? She didn't answer immediately. I watched her face, which was doing something complicated. I don't think I knew how to say it, she said finally. Okay. I nodded. I can hear that. And I'm sorry if I've contributed to that feeling. Because if you felt that way and couldn't tell me, then I've missed something I should have caught. I meant that. I was not making the concession strategically. I genuinely didn't want to have been the kind of husband who made his wife feel she had to shrink. But I need you to understand something. She finally looked at me. When you said what you said at dinner, when you put it in terms of choice, I heard it as the clearest thing you'd said to me in a long time. More honest than anything you'd said in months, actually. And I decided to respond to it at face value, because responding to it as anything else would have been a way of deciding that you didn't mean your own words. I set down my mug. I'm not going to decide that you don't mean your words. That's not how I want to be with you, and it's not how I want you to be with me. She was quiet. But I've also already contacted an attorney, I said, and I've been looking at apartments. I want you to know that because I think you deserve to know where I am. I haven't signed anything. I haven't made final decisions. But I'm not pretending we're fine when we're not. That would be its own kind of dishonesty, and I'd rather not do it. The garden was very still. Somewhere down the street, a child was calling out to someone, and another child called back, and then it was quiet again. You looked at apartments, she said. Yes. After one conversation. After a long time of smaller conversations that pointed in the same direction. The one at dinner just said it clearly. I looked at her steadily. You said what you'd choose. I'm not going to argue with that. If you've changed your mind, or if you're telling me now that the way you said it was a mistake, that's something I want to hear. But I need you to hear, in return, that it already happened. I can't unhear it. She put her mug down. She was not crying, but her eyes had that particular focused dryness that comes just before or just after when someone is working hard to hold a specific shape. I don't know what I want, she said. That's honest, I said. I appreciate that. You don't seem... She stopped, started over. You're so calm. You've been calm through all of this, and it scares me. It's like you made your decision, and you're just waiting for me to catch up to it. Is that true? I considered it. Have I made my decision? Looking at her across the patio table, with the afternoon light coming through the lattice fence and putting dappled shadows on the wooden slats between us, I found I couldn't tell her that I hadn't. I had looked at apartments. I had spoken to an attorney. I had moved my pillow and my phone charger to the spare room without being asked. Those were decisions, even if they'd arrived quietly, one at a time, without a single large dramatic moment. I haven't told you it's over, I said. That's still true. But I've also stopped pretending we can go back to wherever we were before you said what you said. That's also true. So what happens now? We talk, I said. Not about Owen. Not about who understands you better, about us. About what you actually feel and what you actually need and whether those things can exist inside this marriage or not. Those are the honest questions. I'd rather answer honest questions than win an argument. She picked up her mug again. Held it. What about Owen, she said. What did he? He seemed alarmed, I said. He didn't want to be in the middle of it. Which, from his perspective, makes sense. He'd built something collegial with a coworker, and suddenly there was a husband calling to inform him that the coworker had named him in a hypothetical that probably felt like a grenade thrown into something comfortable. I wasn't saying it to be unkind. I was saying it because it was accurate. He seems like someone who prefers his complexity managed, not delivered directly. She absorbed that. I watched it land. I'm not saying that as a verdict on him, I added. I'm saying it as an observation. He's a colleague who responded to an uncomfortable situation by creating distance. That's a reasonable human response. But it's also information. She said nothing for a while. Then, quietly, I've been messaging him less. I noticed, I said. She looked at me sharply. You notice everything, she said. I try to. It's not surveillance. It's just that I think people tell you most of what you need to know if you listen to them. I've been listening to you. I paused. I think you've stopped listening to yourself. The afternoon moved around us. The shadows shifted through the lattice. A neighbor's screen door opened and closed. I need some time, she said finally, to think. Real time, not a dinner and a phone call and a decision. I need space to understand what I actually feel. That's fair, I said. And I need you to not. I need you to tell me if you decide something. Not just move out and leave. I will, I said. You'll know before anything final happens. You have my word on that." She nodded. We sat with our cooling mugs for another few minutes, not talking, which was the most honest thing we'd done at that table and longer than I wanted to count. I moved out 16 days later. Not because she pushed me out and not because I'd stopped caring. I moved out because after those 16 days, during which we had 3 more conversations like the one on the patio, careful and honest and exhausting in the way only honesty can be exhausting, I understood that what she needed to discover about herself, she could not discover while I was in the same space. My presence was a variable she was trying to eliminate, not maliciously, just practically. She needed to know what she wanted when the shape of our life together wasn't right in front of her, organizing her feelings by proximity. I understood that. I even respected it. On the morning I left, a Tuesday, the complex I'd chosen had a unit available. I brought 2 bags to the door, and she was standing in the kitchen doorway with her arms folded, not blocking me, just watching. It was the same way I'd been watching her for months. I found something almost formal about it, something that would have looked like opposition to a stranger, but was actually, I thought, a kind of recognition. 2 people who had both finally stopped managing the situation and started being in it. "You said you'd tell me," she said. "I'm telling you," I said. "This isn't final." "No," I agreed. "It's not final. It's honest." She looked like she wanted to say something else, and I waited for it, genuinely, because I had committed to listening. But she pressed her lips together and looked down at the floor between us, and then back up. And whatever the sentence had been, she decided not to say it yet. "Okay," she said. "I'll be in touch," I said, "about the practical things. And if you want to talk before that, you can call me." I picked up the bags and went through the door. The apartment was on the 2nd floor, like I'd wanted. It had good light in the mornings and a window over the kitchen sink that looked out over a small courtyard where someone had planted a climbing rose that hadn't yet climbed much, but was trying hard. I liked the trying. I unpacked in a few hours. There wasn't much to unpack. I'd taken what was mine and left what was ours, and only taken what was unambiguously mine, which turned out to be less than I'd expected. Either I owned very little, or I'd built a life out of things that were both of ours. And now I was discovering what the me-only portion looked like, which was a few boxes and some furniture and a phone charger and a book I was still halfway through. I stood in the kitchen on the first evening, eating a simple dinner I'd made because the takeout options in the neighborhood looked fine, but I wasn't in the mood for it. And I looked out the window at the climbing rose, and I thought about what Lily had said on the patio. "You're so calm. It's like you made your decision, and you're waiting for me to catch up." I thought, maybe, and then I thought, but what was the alternative? The alternative was to pretend I hadn't heard what she said at the dinner table, to let the comment wash off me as if words didn't mean things, to fight for her in the way she'd maybe expected, arguing and pleading and performing the insecurity she needed to see to feel valuable. I could have done it. I understood the script, and she would have felt temporarily more certain of her own importance in my life, and I would have felt permanently like a man who could be moved around by a sentence. I wasn't that man. I had listened to her. I had taken her seriously. I had not made her choices for her, had not decided on her behalf that she didn't mean the things she said. I had simply heard her, believed her, and organized my actions accordingly. That was respect. That was the version of love that I could actually offer. Not the love that argues and begs and tries to override what a person tells you about themselves, but the love that takes a person at their word and trusts them to mean it. Whether that was what she'd wanted, whether she'd wanted to be taken seriously more than she'd wanted to be fought over, was a question only she could answer. She had my number. I had told her she could call. Outside, the climbing rose moved a little in the evening breeze, its shoots reaching for something they couldn't quite see yet, but seemed to believe was there. I finished my dinner. I wasn't waiting. I was simply present in a space that was mine, living in the consequences of honesty the way you live in a room after you've finally opened all the windows, a little colder than before, noticeably cleaner, and with more light coming in than you'd expected.
Thanks for listening.